And we're live. Hey everyone. Am I really live? Because we were testing it on just me earlier, so let's make sure we're live. Yay! Okay. Hello everyone. It's Rachel Dawn. This is Real Talk with Rachel Dawn, episode 6. And tonight we're talking about spiritual warfare. So I'm here with my friends.
Hello.
Jenny and Talaria. You guys have seen them before if you've chatted with us in the past. And so can everybody hear me? First of all, if you can hear, I want to make sure the volume's working. Let me tell you about it. We spent like 45 minutes tonight playing with freaking technology. And guys, let me tell you, I'm so excited. We're like this close into having a video system that will let me show you books the right way. We've only been doing this for 7 months and we're this close. We tried some things tonight. We tried a different camera. We couldn't get the microphone to work, so it's done. We'll try next time, and I will actually have a camera that can show you books the right way. So anyway, today they're going to be backwards. Just know that. So if you're here, click like, comment, say hey, let us know you're here. If you would please share the video to your timeline, so that way your friends see it. So do that right now. So that way your friends see it and they can log on, they can join us. That would be super awesome. So cool. I appreciate that. And then if you don't get to share it right now, you can share it afterwards. That's cool too. But definitely share it, get it out there so that other people can join us. Cool. So, like I said, tonight we're talking spiritual warfare. And let me just tell you real quick before we get started that this topic doesn't intimidate me, but this is definitely not a topic that like I planned on covering. It's something that I am very comfortable with, that I understand, that I've studied. So it's something I can definitely talk about comfortably, but I know a lot of my audience is in a different place than me spiritually, because I connect with a lot of people who aren't necessarily believers or aren't followers and things like that. And so when I surveyed my mailing list, which by the way, if you're not a part of my mailing list already, if you go to either one of my websites, you can go to racheldawnwrites.com or you can go to nowwhatstory.com. Either one will have a pop-up where you can sign up for my mailing list. You definitely want to be on that. You get copies of the videos every month as we do them. You'll get copies of my blogs and exciting news and announcements and sale codes and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so I surveyed my mailing list before I started doing this to say, hey, I'm going to do these videos. What of these topics would you like me to cover? And spiritual warfare I put on there like kind of just as like a last minute add-on, and it was like the second highest rated thing that people wanted to hear about. So I was like, dude, people be getting deep and I'm not ready to go there yet. So we're going to dive right into spiritual warfare. So tonight, what I want to cover with you guys, I'm going to keep it real basic. We're going to keep this very introductory, very surface level. There's one of us here that is much more spiritually mature than the rest of us here. And she wanted to dive into some things that I'm not even ready for.
Not it.
So I had to rein her in, rein her back. If you guys have like deep questions after this, she's your girl. So, but tonight we're going to keep it very basic. We're going to talk about what is spiritual warfare, why does it happen, what does it look like, and then what can you do to fight against it or to stop spiritual warfare in your life. So we're going to hit on all those things. I'm going to try to keep this at 30 minutes or less because I know people's attention spans, I get it, and you guys are busy. And so I'm going to try to hit these things real quick. Then I'll tell you guys about kind of next month and some exciting things coming up with Real Talk videos in the future once we wrap up, because you'll want to know that stuff too. Big stuff, big exciting stuff coming. So what is spiritual warfare? If you're on the event page and you saw kind of my introduction to this topic, it had this little blurb. It said, you may not realize it, but you're at war. You may not wear military fatigues. You may not eat in a mess hall. You may not dodge physical bullets, but you're in a war, an invisible one. It's called spiritual warfare. You'll be in a war from the moment you're born until the moment that you die. You were born into this war. You didn't ask for it. And you can't escape the battle between God and Satan, good and evil, even if you don't know that it exists. And that's one of the reasons Tay and I were talking earlier tonight that I'm excited about sharing in this topic, because there are so many people who don't even know that spiritual warfare exists, and they're just having all these things happen in their life and they don't know why and they don't understand it. So I'm excited to talk about it with you guys in case you don't know that spiritual warfare is a real thing or that Satan is a real enemy. Surprise! All that's true, and it's real, and it's happening all around us at all times. And so some of the stuff in this topic that we're going to talk about, trust me, like, I get it. It can be like super out there and weird and crazy and seem a little bit creepy and sketchy and weird. But just hang with us, if you will. So, why does spiritual warfare happen? So I'm going to tell you guys the story of the shot heard around the heavens. Because I'm a huge American history nerd. And so I'm so impressed with myself that I got to throw that line in there. How the cosmic battle between God and Satan started, right? So way back in the beginning of time, and actually before the beginning of time, right? And this story is not in Genesis, where I think it should be, because that would be in order. But Tay says the story's in Revelation, about where we think. And I was going to look it up and then I didn't. But Tay says that's where she thinks it is. We can find it for you and I'll post it in the comments later. But it's the story about basically before God created the earth, Satan was an angel. So he was an angel. He's hanging out in heaven with everybody. He was actually the angel, like the worship leader, basically, is what he was doing. And, he and God were bros. They were living it up. Everything was gravy. And then Satan got cocky, and he came at God and tried to slight him. And, I'm not saying they had a dance battle, but I'm saying it could have been part of it. And so things went down that Satan... Because, God's like, hey, I'm in charge. You can't be in charge. Both of us can't be in charge. One of us has got to be in charge. And it's going to be me because I vote. And that's what matters. And so God kicked Satan out of heaven. He threw him down to the earth, into the belly of the earth, which is what we know today in our culture and in the Bible is hell. So that's where Satan... lives, if you will, but actually realistically he lives and controls and operates in the earth. And so there are so many things that you may not even realize that are controlled by him and his forces, which we call demons or whatever, spiritual, whatever, evil spirits, whatever you've heard that called. So those are Satan's minions, basically. We can let's call them that. And so he's like a really, really evil Gru is who Satan is. So that's what happened. So because of that, ever since then, Satan is just out to beat God. But clue, Satan, you're not going to do that. You can't. He's God. So since he can't beat God and he can't really even get to God, he does the next best thing that he knows how to do, and that's to attack us, God's children. Or if you can't even see or believe yourself as being a child of God, at least understand that you're a creation of God, right? That was water dripping. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Okay. So Satan tries to attack God's creation because in the beginning it says that God created us in his own image. So we are literally... the reflection or image of God, and Satan hates God, hates everything about him, and so naturally that spills over to us. We get roped into this drama. Ain't nothing we can do about it. So we're in it. What do we do about it, right? What'd you comment on?
Ezekiel and Isaiah.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. She found it. Yep. So there you go. That's where you find it. So that's how the battle started. That's how we got roped into it. So what does spiritual warfare look like? Well, first of all, let me stop talking. Do you guys have anything to say about that so far?
About what you've said so far?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay.
Except Gru. I mean, you can't bring him down like that.
I know.
You gotta switch it up.
He's
you gotta give somebody else. He is.
He got redeemed. We don't know if Satan's going to do that yet. Nothing. Okay. So what does spiritual warfare look like? For me, this is something that I definitely wanted to hit on with you guys because it has been really helpful for me in my life to study more about spiritual warfare and about Satan's tactics and battle strategies and things like that. Because once I can learn to recognize when it's him operating in my life, it helps me be more effective in fighting against it. I don't even know a good analogy I can use there, but well, so say that you're having some sort of attack physically in your body. If you can't pinpoint what it is, then you can't treat it, right? You're a nurse.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
So it's the same way. If you don't, the easier and the sooner and the quicker and the more readily you can recognize when you're being engaged in spiritual warfare, when you're being attacked, when you're being lured into something that you need to fight against, then you will be able to fight against it. And that's really been helpful for me. That keeps me from getting angry at the wrong people or for the wrong reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to read you a lot of the stuff that I'm reading. Honestly, I kind of pulled like little tidbits and quips from a couple devos that I was reading over the last month. One is, if you guys don't have the Bible app already on your phone, please get it. The Bible, it's Bible Hub? Bible Hub. No, Bible Gateway?
I use Bible Gateway or Bible.com.
Bible.com. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Either way. It is the Bible app for your phone. Awesome reason. Yes, YouVersion. That's the word I was trying to think of. So it's the YouVersion Bible app. Definitely get it on your phone. And two of the plans that I would recommend that you start right away, especially if this is a topic that's of interest to you. And if you're not a big reader, I get that. And like you guys that track with me, you know that I'm constantly all in my life. It's not just you guys. I do it to everyone. I'm always giving them books to read, always talking about books to read and things that I'm learning from. So if you're not a big reader, the Bible app, Devos, will be a good place for you to start because it just gives you, like, you can study practically any topic that you want to cover, relationships or stress or, I mean, anything. And it just gives you like a page to read for the day and then throw some scripture in there. And so it's really awesome. So get that if you don't already have it. And then the two plans that I really, it was funny, I was studying them, and then we chose this topic for the month, and I was already studying those things, and everything lined up perfectly. Look at God. So the two devos are, one's by Priscilla Schreier, called The Armor of God. She has a paper devo by the same name. And then the other one is called The Invisible War by Rick Warren. And so what it said from one of those devos was, people are often pawns in this cosmic battle. And just like I talked about, Satan can't hurt you. So what do you do when you can't hurt someone? You hurt their children. So Satan goes after you. And then Priscilla Schreier says, the most troubling things in your life, the things that you perceive with your 5 physical senses, are not your real issue. Everything that occurs in the visible physical world is directly connected to the wrestling match being waged in the invisible spiritual world. Think about that for a second. Your real enemy, the devil, wants you to ignore this spiritual reality behind the physical one. Duh, that's a great battle plan. Because as long as you're focused on what you can see with your physical eyes, he can continue to run rampant underneath the surface. The more you disregard him, the more damage he's free to do. The enemy may be invisible, but he is not fictional. He is very real and very persistent, waging war against us constantly. Then I just want to read you this quick kind of introduction from Rick Warren. He says, you have an enemy, and it's not who you think it is. It isn't the person you're competing against at work. It isn't the difficult neighbor. It isn't your ex-spouse. It isn't the group in your neighborhood who are taking unbiblical positions against you. Does anybody have any of those people in their lives right now that they're fighting against? And if you haven't thought about this before, like, yeah, you've thought that person is your enemy and you hate them and you're all sorts of stressed out about them and you're just constantly thinking about what they're doing wrong to you and all the things. It's not about them. Just so you know, your enemy isn't flesh and blood at all. Your enemy is Satan. Your battle is with Satan. One of the reasons we so often walk around with discouragement and defeat is because we don't really understand who we are battling. We don't understand who our real enemy is. We blame everyone but the one who the Bible calls a thief and a liar, who is out to destroy anyone who loves and follows Jesus, or any creation of his, by the way. Satan does attack non-believers as well. He's just a little more aggressive when it comes to people who are actively engaged in following Jesus. To find victory, start attacking the right enemy, Satan. And I just think that was a great way to help you understand a little bit more about what is and isn't Satan coming against you. So Satan's goals, again, we're talking about what does spiritual warfare look like. Satan's goals look like this. I'm going to list a few of them. I'm definitely not going to list a comprehensive list of all the ways that he comes against us, but I've got some pretty good examples here. Priscilla Schreier says the enemy's overarching device is deception. And this started all the way back in the Garden of Eden when Satan showed up and he's talking to Eve. And what he says to Eve, the first conversation they had was, well, did God really say that? So he was trying to get Eve confused about what God had said to her, about God, who God said they were and what they were supposed to do and how they were supposed to live. And so he's still doing that today. So he deceives us into fear. Is one of the ways that he works against us. He loves to get people fearful. And I've seen this in my own life. He definitely attacks and tries to make us think about things and be fearful about things, puts thoughts in our minds, puts circumstances around us to cause us to be fearful. And one of the things that he's done in my life is he's kind of in the past has put this fearful thought under my prayer life, and to put the thought in my head that, oh, is God really going to show up this time? Is he going to answer? And he gives me that fearful thought when I'm praying. And it was within the last year, I heard this minister that I follow. He's a great man of faith that I really respect and have learned a lot from. He was talking about how that's one of the ways that Satan attacks him. And recently a situation had come up where he was praying for somebody in a situation, and he was just being plagued with this thought of, well, what if I pray and God doesn't answer? Like, then God's going to look like a hypocrite. I'm going to look like a failure, all these things. And so that was keeping him from praying. Well, that's spiritual warfare. Like, that's the enemy trying to keep you from praying because he knows praying is going to do the things that God wants to do. And so he deceives you into thinking all of those things. And what he kind of took away as the lesson from that, and what God showed him is, you just pray, you do what you're supposed to do, and let me worry about me. Let me worry about my reputation. This is God speaking. Like, God's like, I got this. Like, don't worry about what comes out of it. You do what you're supposed to do, and I'll do the rest. And it was so freeing for me to hear this person of faith that I respect tell that story, because it made me go, oh, great, I'm not the only one that feels that way and that thinks those things, and I'm not alone in this, and that doesn't mean that I am failing, that my faith isn't strong enough, any of those things. So do you guys have any examples of Satan attacking you through deception or with fear?
Yeah, not necessarily those.
Okay.
But what I would say is, to your point about when you engage in the war, so essentially when you gain an understanding of his tactics, and when you realize the authority and the power that you have through Jesus, if that's where you believe and you stand, you're more of a threat to Satan. And so of course you and I just realized at different times in my life when I started to gain an understanding of the power of tithing, which is a huge spiritual principle, in terms of God's principles and operating in his kingdom. Whereas it's a difficult thing to do, but when I offer that trust in God and I'm willing to put myself in that way and offering that sacrifice, of course, those were the times of my life where
you were attacked
I was
financially.
attacked financially,
absolutely.
because he's causing me to question the decisions I'm making in my relationship to follow God. And so those are examples. I had a lot of financial ones because that was an area where I think I was, it was a sort of a roller coaster in the beginning, and making that commitment and sticking with it. But when I started to understand, it makes sense that I would be facing those challenges when I'm making the decision to do that. So
yeah. In fact, I'm sorry. Hang on, just one second.
Yep.
I was trying to think when I just heard something about that, but it was at that conference we were at last weekend. Somebody said from stage, the minute that you make a decision, immediately it's going to be challenged. So that's in any area of your life, whether it's finances or, I need to get out of this relationship, or I need to change jobs, or whatever. Any decision that you make to move forward that's the direction that God is leading you, obviously Satan's going to come challenge that right away to make you question, to deceive you. Go ahead.
So Rachel looked at me when they talked about tithing because I decided...
Judgment came out. No, I'm just kidding. It's not judgment.
I decided that I would tithe. And when I decided I was going to tithe, I was also moving into my condo. So I was tithing, and that up and down, well, I went down and I didn't get back up because that first mortgage hit, and I decided I couldn't tithe. That there's no way I can do that. So that's going to be a challenge. That, yeah, do I believe enough? Do I have enough faith to actually get back to tithing? And when the hard times come,
Right.
will he be there?
Right. And that,
So-
I mean, that's exactly what it is. That's
Yeah.
learning to lean in
It's
and
the
trust
fear.
God. Oh,
And then
yeah.
you step out.
Yep.
Like, if you step out, then he'll stop attacking.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
How
Right,
strong
right,
are you?
Yep. And God doesn't have an opportunity to show up and show off in your life if you're not
Right.
giving him that opportunity, right?
Yep.
If
And
you're
I
not
wimped out.
trusting
Big time. Big time wimped out.
okay, but that's
no,
so
today
exciting,
I
though,
was
like
getting off the exit, and I was thinking about that. Like, we did a prayer challenge. I was praying for a certain person for their life to get better, for addiction to leave them, and I wasn't seeing the results of that, and so I stopped praying. But this was, a while ago, and I was sitting in my car at a stoplight, and I was talking to God, and I was like, why did I quit praying? Like, it wasn't bothering me at all.
Mhm.
So I gave up on that other person, essentially.
Mm.
So then,
Girl.
right then and there, I started praying again, like, hey, watch over, protect this person, help them with the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely backed out of that.
So we're going to talk about that more. Jenny just jumped right to my Bible story from tonight, and it's so exciting. So remember that when I tell that story from Daniel 10. So were you going to say something? Nope. Okay. So another way that Satan attacks, one of his goals is to he loves to cause us to lose our peace. Because Jesus said, one of the last things that Jesus said before he left the earth was, my peace I leave with you. And I mean, Jesus's peace is like a whole nother level, right? And so we're promised to have that. But Satan works in whatever way he can to get us to lose that peace through worry and anxiety and all those things. He, when you're going through something, he's the one who shows up. When you hear this in your head, know this, that this is the enemy. When you hear these things, well, what are you going to do about that? Well, what happens if this happens? Well, but what are you going to do? Well, how are you going to handle that? Well, what are you going to do? When those things are going through your head, that's the enemy attacking you. Because he wants to keep you worried about it, fretful about it, anxious about it, so that you don't turn it over to God and just rest in him. That's something Joyce Meyer talks about this all the time. She's constantly saying, because this is something that her husband is really good at, that she's not awesome at all the time, is casting her care. And so all the time, like constantly, she's constantly telling stories about going through a situation, and she'll go to Dave about it, who's her husband, and all he says is, Joyce, just cast your care. Just cast your care. And it's so easy for him, but it's a struggle for her. And so that's what we're supposed to do in those situations. But the enemy loves us to do the opposite. And hear me when I say this, along the topic, I wanted to make sure that I made this bullet point, is that certainly anxiety is spiritual warfare. And that is attack, and there are demons at work there, and all sorts of things. There is also chemical imbalances that cause anxiety. So don't think, because here's what I don't want to happen to you. If you're someone that has more of a proclivity to stress and anxiety and worry and things like that, I want you to work on that. I want you to pray about it. I want you to seek out about it. I want you to try to turn that over to God and stop worrying and stop being anxious. But if it doesn't happen right away, or if it doesn't happen, I don't want you to think that your faith isn't good enough and that you're failing. There are obviously cases where you might need medication or something. But I believe the majority of people with anxiety and worry and all of that at a really high level, if they started to talk to God about it, I bet he could lead them through it and lead them out of it. But I want you to hear me when I say that. So you're not failing, you're not doing it wrong. So one of the other ways Satan attacks us, and this is one of his favorites too. These are all his favorites, just so you know. He loves to drive people into hopelessness. And this is the way that Satan really, really attacked me when I was going through my divorce and everything. If you've heard much of my story, if you look at it kind of from a bird's eye view in retrospect, that was really how he attacked me, is he drove me into hopelessness about my future and about my life. And so that's one of the ways that he attacks. You pointed out a good one that I hadn't even thought of, that he loves to isolate people. So no matter what you're going through, any way that he's attacking you, if he can get you alone, off by yourself, away from people who are going to speak life and truth into you.
Yeah. When I quit tithing, I definitely didn't go to Rachel and tell her that I quit tithing. I kept that to myself until now.
So that's what he does. He loves to tell you that you're the only person going through this. Nobody would understand. It's better if you're alone anyway. There's a stink bug in my house. Listen, we're just gonna
I feel like
we're just gonna pretend it's not
landed.
here. We're just gonna.
Okay, it's fine.
So we're supposed to have 5 minutes left. Okay.
Okay.
So and finally, the bullet point that I have finally. This is definitely not the end of his tactics. Is distraction. Priscilla Schreier
For real.
said something about that too. Let me find that. So her little Devo over here said, and I posted this on the event page, your enemy wants to distract you so he can blindside you. And listen to me, he's not indiscriminately shooting these arrows of his. He has tailored his strategy. And this is the point that I wanted to make here. He has studied your tendencies and your habits, your deepest fears and your weaknesses, and he is aimed at those areas in particular. He knows he can't destroy you. You're eternally secure in Jesus, but he fully intends to sidetrack your attention by setting any number of internal fires ablaze in your life: insecurity, intimidation, anxiety, worry, busyness, because he wants you unfocused while he sneaks up behind. And the point that I wanted to make on this is that Satan has been studying you since the day you were born. And he has been, I've blogged about this before, like he has planted seeds in your life with experiences, things that people have said, different things that he has grown strongholds in your mind. He's mapped out pathways of lies and programming so that when an experience comes up in your life, he points back to that. And he's like, oh, remember that, you're a failure. Remember that, you're whatever. And so he's been studying you. He's got his battle strategy all worked out. And just like Priscilla Schreier said, like he is very, very, very strategic in his attacks on you. So he looks for exactly the ways, the things that he knows are going to distract you, the things that he knows are going to make you fearful, the things that he knows are going to peck away at your deepest insecurities. That's what he does. And he's real, real good at it. So again, just learn to be able to recognize those things. If you want to study more about spiritual warfare, I've got some great books that we're going to talk about at the end. We're going to list those. Also, Ephesians 6 talks about the armor of God. You can kind of read up on that, about what your armor is against spiritual warfare. But yeah.
Yeah, so we got a question from actually a guy on Rachel's team. So that's why it looks like it's her posting. But the question is, and I want to kind of answer this question. Not that I'm answering the question, but I want to comment because we were joking earlier. So you might not have gotten the thing. The whole. It's not a matter of spiritual maturity, right. But the great thing about being in community and relationship with different people who are believers or whatnot is that we all have kind of different gifts and things that we bring to the table. So Ephesians also talks about different parts of the body, us being the body of Christ, and how we operate in different strengths and things like that. So the point is, when she talked about, going deeper or whatnot, it's not a maturity thing. However, Rachel gets really excited about evangelism or introducing new people to new concepts. She's very good at it. She's very excited about taking a new thing and making it appealing to other people. Whereas I, on the other hand, am more excited generally about going deeper with people. So we talk about discipleship, and that's taking a person who has said yes to following Jesus and they want to make that a big part of their life. I want to go deeper. I want to kind of help people start to walk that lifestyle out and taking them one step to the next. And so as I'm growing in that, right, I get really excited about taking people through that process. So his question is, does Satan have the same abilities as God? And if not, where does Satan's abilities end? And so to comment on that, what I would say is Satan does definitely not, he does not have the same abilities as God.
Right.
No one does, right? So God is the numero uno. But Satan's abilities end at the point that we stop giving him access. And so when we talk about authority and knowing who we are, right? It's having our identity in Christ, and then also knowing that our authority, the power for us to resist the enemy, it's a war, but we've already got the victory. And so when Jesus did what he did, he came, he died, he lived, he died, he rose again on the cross, right? That signifies, he did that, all of that, for us to know that we have the authority to not have to succumb to anything that the enemy comes against us with. And so what I would say is, what I've learned about spiritual warfare and still learning is, as much as I've heard from mentors, right, in any situation, you kind of want to focus on the solution, not the problem. While it's important to know the enemy's tactics, what I have begun to focus more on is, what does God have to say about all this? How does this play into God's ultimate plan and purpose? And so for me, that's really exciting, because I can now, as a person in the body of Christ, as a believer, I can help equip other believers in knowing their authority, knowing their identity, and knowing how we can, like, the power that we have to stop the enemy in his tracks. And his abilities end because he can't do anything that we don't give him permission to do, if that makes sense. So there's a whole lot of layers.
Whole lot.
But this,
whole lot
I know she was going to go into the resources, but this is one of the books that it's small, but it's meaty, but it really does.
Just hold a mirror up. Hold a mirror up to the screen. Then you can read it.
It's called Destined for the Throne, and it's all about understanding the role of spiritual warfare in our maturity as believers, and what it means to partner with God through prayer, which is one of our main weapons, and that kind of thing. So I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Girl, it took me like, here's what I'm going to say about this. I learned from her, and then I say things to you that are simpler. Like, I relay things. I'm like, all the knowledge, here's what this means to people who are just trying to get it. Like we're all beginners here.
But that's what
I take it. Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. Yes. So it took me like a year and a half to read this book. It's like
it should take a minute.
It's 130 pages, you guys. This is a tiny book. It took me that long because it is so meaty. But if you're at that level and you're ready for it, it's going to be good. It's going to be real good for you. But it is deep and it is heavy and it's good. It put a lot of. I was telling Tay earlier, it convicted me a lot in the burden of prayer, in what responsibility I have in praying, not just for myself, but for the church, for the world, for people in my community. I mean, it's big. And actually, the story that I'm going to tell, we're already over 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap up fast. But the story that I'm going to tell, actually, I got the revelation from it when I was reading. It's towards the back of this book. He tells the story of Daniel, and it clicked for me like it never had before. So that's the story I'm going to tell you guys. But one bullet point I highlighted there, we kind of talked about it, is that people can be used as tools or pawns of Satan. And in fact, Rick Warren says this little blurb in one of the days of his Devo, The Invisible War: everyone gets used by Satan. He will put thoughts in the minds of Christians and non-Christians alike. At times, we can all be a pawn of Satan, so protect yourself with the armor of God. So again, we talked about that. Study the armor of God. Dig into that some more for you. And if anybody, like if you guys have a particular interest in any part of this video or any other of the videos that we've done, and you'd like us to dive deeper in something specific in those videos, please let us know. Reach out, message, comment, whatever, because we can do that. Because we're making this up as we go, so we can do whatever we want. So the bad news is you were born for battle, but there's good news, and Tay alluded to it. You were born to win the battle. Satan isn't afraid of you, but he's afraid who's in you, which is God. And your victory has already been secured in Christ. And now with the Holy Spirit in you, you don't have to be afraid of Satan. You're on the winning side of this war, so act like it. So what can you do? What are your tactics? So the armor of God, I'm not going to dig into that for the sake of time and for the sake of I don't even fully understand all the pieces of the armor of God yet. I started to study it to prepare for this video, and I was like, what? I don't even get some of this stuff. So maybe when I am more enlightened in some of those pieces, I'll break all those down for you some other time. But you can read up on that for yourself now. And I know Joyce Meyer teaches on it. Actually, in Priscilla Schreier's Devo, she breaks down a lot of the pieces, and so you can study that there. But the big tools that we have in spiritual warfare, these are the biggest things that I've seen in my life that have been most helpful for me, and these are like the two heavy hitters, the two P's. First of all, prayer. I mean, like, I'm just gonna be real with you guys. So, like, growing up in the church, like, obviously prayer's talked about a lot, and you're supposed to pray, and it's this whole thing. But I never understood. It was probably explained, and I just never heard it. I was probably never in a position to hear it, why it's important, and what it means, and what it does. And actually, the first revelation that I really got about prayer, there's another book that I should have gotten, Good Morning, Holy Spirit by Benny Hinn. Write that down. I could have gotten it out to show you guys, but I'll put it on the list at the end. Because that book really helped me understand the power of prayer. He gets pretty specific. But as far as prayer and spiritual warfare goes, you can't really see the book, but there's a set of books by an author named Frank Peretti. They're real thick because they're novels, so they're stories, so they're easy and fun to read. Trust me on that. The first one is called This Present Darkness, and this is actually the sequel, Piercing the Darkness. And they're real life stories of spiritual warfare. So it tells the story of these characters, and you meet them like in the normal world, like one of the main characters is like a newspaper editor or something. And so it tells their stories, but then like it tells the behind the scenes story. So one thing that I just remember real specifically is there's this one scene where this guy is married and he's at his house, and this girl shows up and tries to have sex with him, basically. And what we get to see as the reader in behind the scenes is that there's a demon inside that girl trying to make her cause this guy fall into lust. It's a demon of lust, and cheat on his wife. And that's real life, dude. Like, that's like a real life situation. And reading the book is actually a little bit scary when you read it at first. Like, you might have nightmares. You might not be able to go to sleep at night. I'm not kidding. Like, I've had several friends that have read it tell me that because, your eyes are open to how real this stuff really is and how it's really going around you in real life. I know I just said real like a million times, but it's legit. And so I know shortly after reading this book, the first kind of experience I remember having with this in my own life is I was driving on the interstate and some other driver gets angry at me for some reason. I don't know what I did to make her angry, but she was angry at me. And I remember, it's like it all happened in slow motion. I'm driving and I see her pull up next to me and jerk her wheel, try to jerk her car into mine. I watched her do it. Her car went the other direction. And it spun out, hit the wall, and she ended up sitting in the middle of the interstate backwards. And I just remember, like I said, it all happened in slow motion. And I'm sure at that time, the reason I knew this is because God gave me the revelation that I was being protected in that moment. That angels were literally flying along with my car. And when she tried to come into my space, they pushed her away. Remember when I talked about this is about to get real weird and like we're going to talk about some freaky stuff? This is the freaky stuff we're talking about. But this is real life, guys. This is really how this works. There's another story in the book I remember that they're talking about somebody's car wouldn't start. They were in a dangerous situation, if you remember that part of the book, and they're trying to get away, and their car wouldn't start, and there were demons sitting there like holding pieces of the engine, not letting it start. And simultaneously, there were people praying for that person and praying for protection of that person. And she was praying for herself. I think it was a female character. And so angels were able to come defeat the demons, and the car started. So, like, again, I mean, this is fiction. It sounds crazy, but this is real life. And it's really like that. And so when you're praying, you're allowing the counter the counterattack, the other army to come in and fight for you on your behalf. You're not in this battle alone. That's the great part, is that it isn't just you and Satan, or you and God and Satan. I mean, that would be good enough. But he gives you this whole army of angels, spiritual warriors that go to battle with you and for you, and you release them into that. You give them armaments and the ability to battle, and you give them what are the words that I'm looking for? Weapons to actually defeat the enemy in those instances by praying. And honestly, they're not going to be released in your favor until praying happens. And that's a lot of what Destined for the Throne talks about, is how it was not A.W. Tozer. Who did you tell me said that quote? John Wesley said, God does nothing except in response to prayer. And so it's real life. Think about it. Think about circumstances in your life where you can see that active, or you can try to use that battle strategy and see if it doesn't make a difference for you. And definitely check out those books. So that's prayer. Again, Destined for the Throne is a great resource for that. We'll talk about resources later. The second power-packed punch of this, and what I've seen in my life is the best battle strategy, is praise. Praise and worship. This is huge, and it's so counterintuitive, especially this is where I've seen it most effective, but especially when you're going through something so hard. Like over the last year, I went through something that was just really, really, really stressful emotionally and mentally, and there were nights I was just on the floor, on my face, crying, writing in my prayer journal to God, like to fix the situation, to change the situation, to change people. It involved other people, so it was very painful, it was very hurtful. And in that moment, the last thing that I wanted to do was start singing or praising. You know, I'm praying to God as fervently as I can. Please change this, help this, make this. I didn't want to, you know, it didn't seem natural or normal in that moment. That praise wasn't coming from that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm stressed out. Same thing when I went through everything. If you guys have heard me tell the story about my gallbladder issues that I had in 2015, I think I've even mentioned that before in a video. Like, there were nights that it was 3 a.m, I'm writhing in pain on the bathroom floor, and I would start worshiping. And it was the last thing that I wanted to do right then because I was in so much pain. But that was the most powerful thing that I could do in that moment. And that's what I believe. It's not like prayer is better than worship or worship is better than prayer. Do them both. I would suggest doing them together, not simultaneously, because then that would be a little confusing. But definitely employ both strategies when you're fighting in a battle, especially the harder the battle is. Worship. And I mean, there are so many things that we could talk about to explain. I mean, I'm sure there are so many spiritual realities of all the things that worship releases and the reason it works, but I just know that it works, okay?
Yeah, I think what it is for me, what it is so when you're praising, you're putting yourself in a posture of thankfulness and gratitude, right? So again, it's the idea that, and I think for me, all those things, if you have fear, you don't have hope. If you don't have joy, then you certainly don't have hope.
Right.
And if your hope is in Jesus, right, then you've got a mindset that no matter what the enemy is throwing at you, you're going to overcome, and it's already won.
Right.
So if the enemy can take you out of that hopelessness,
Right.
then you're stuck, right? You have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
So what praise has done for me is that it puts me in a mindset and in a spirit, if you will, of thankfulness and gratitude, of an understanding that I've already won.
Right.
So if I can praise, then it's much harder for me to be negative and deep in my situation or my negative circumstances if I'm presenting it, if I'm coming at it from a position from the get-go of praise, which is thankfulness and gratitude, and I'm acknowledging the fact that I've already won and saying thanks God for helping me overcome what has already been won for me.
Right. Yeah, and it takes to her point, it takes your mind off your problem. You're taking your mind off your problem and you're putting it on God in that moment, and you're worshiping how good He is. You're remembering things that He's done for you in the past, you know, those type of things. So prayer and praise. So I kind of skipped ahead. I was supposed to tell you my Bible story when we were talking about prayer. So I'm going to tell you that, and then we'll kind of wrap up, and we're over time. Apparently, I can't do less than an hour. Can we just talk about it?
We'll work on it.
So, anyway, when I was reading Destined for the Throne, like I said, I got to the end of the book, and there's this story of Daniel, who's a prophet, in Daniel 10. And so, understand, in the Old Testament, in the days before Jesus came, the nation of Israel, so the Jewish people who were God's chosen people, were this people that lived, and there were other communities and other types of people, but they were this one people. And other nations and other types of people around them had kings. And so they begged to have kings, and they begged, before God gave them kings, he gave them prophets. And so Daniel was actually, and then even after there were kings, there were still prophets that were kind of helping guide the kings and all the things. So anyway, so Daniel was one of the last prophets, actually, before you skip ahead to the New Testament and when Jesus came. And there's this story in Daniel 10 where he talks about he was on his face praying in intercession for the nation of Israel. And he was believing God for an answer for the next prophecy for what was going to happen for them. And so he's on his face, he's praying, he's crying, he's doing all the things, and just really, really deep in prayer for 21 days. And on the 24th day, which doesn't make sense, but anyway, after those 21 days of praying, very fervently, very aggressively, this angel finally shows up and says, "Hey dude, like, I'm here, I've got your answer. Funny story, actually, the first day you started praying, God sent me out from heaven with the answer." But then
21
this 21 days?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, so on the 21st day, this angel shows up, and he's like, "So God sent me out on the first day that you were praying, but as I started to go out, this evil spirit came and started fighting with me. So we're grappling, we're in it, we're MMAing, there's cauliflower ear happening, it's getting crazy." And so he keeps fighting. Well, all that time that he was fighting, Daniel was still praying. And so, here we go. So, took him 21 days to get through. And what the angel says is that actually Michael, the archangel, finally showed up and with all his hordes of band of merry men, and they were able to finally defeat the evil spirit and his homies. And so he could get through, and he could come and bring the news. He could bring the answer that Daniel was praying for. And so what the point of that story is, the angel tells this to Daniel. And so the point that Paul Bilheimer makes in the story, in the book, is that God had answered that prayer on day 1. So, although the answer to, I'll read you the whole thing. So, here's a historical account of a literal conflict in the unseen realms. It is doubtless the pattern of many similar conflicts that rage constantly in the spirit world. God made the prophecy. He sought for a man upon whose heart he could lay and the burden of intercession. Intercession is the most unselfish thing you can do. So as always, God made the decision in heaven. A man was called upon to enforce that decision in the earth through intercession and faith. That's getting into some deep stuff. So while Daniel was on his face interceding, a battle was raging in the heavens. 2 angels and possibly the spirit forces under their control were engaged in a fierce conflict for 3 weeks. Although the answer to his prayer was granted and already on the way, if Daniel had given up, it presumably would never have arrived. Therefore, the real battle was fought and the victory was won in the place of prayer down in the riverbank. The decisive action was there. This biblical account suggests a principle which may explain many apparent unanswered prayers. Since our promise in 1 John 5 is true, that every prayer is offered in faith according to the will of God is answered in heaven always. Every prayer offered according to the will of God is answered always. But Satan never allows an answer to reach the earth if he can prevent it. Let that one sink in for a second. So he's going to do everything that he can about everything that you pray about, for yourself, for other people. He's trying to stop that. That's what this whole war is about. Persistence and the importunity in prayer, I had to Google that word, by the way, are not needed to persuade a willing God, but to overcome opposition of hindering spirits. The answer to many prayers that have already been granted in heaven may never be received because the petitioner becomes weary, discouraged, or intimidated and gives up the fight.
That's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
One reason many prayers are unanswered is the failure of the petitioner to continue with importunity until the answer is received. So that's how powerful prayer is, and it works, and that's kind of insight on how it works, and an insight into the battle. So that's a good word. That's a good story. That's everything.
Look at God.
Yes.
As she said.
So that's all my notes. So look at me. 50 minutes. Duh. 10 minutes shy of an hour.
You're getting better. That's improvement.
I know. So I'm going to let you guys go. But know that next month I've got a guest coming on. I'm very excited about. These two ladies might be back. I don't know. We've got to check their schedules. They're welcome to be back. But one of my guests for sure is going to be a guy. So I'm excited. First time on Real Talk. We're going to have a guy, and he has a freaking awesome story that I can't wait for you guys to hear. Yeah, seriously awesome. And you're going to start seeing his face a lot. This guy is kind of coming on board to help me with Real Talk and with my ministry. And so he's going to handle some behind the scenes things. Hallelujah, Jesus. That is an answer to prayer.
Won't he do it?
You know what he's going to figure out is how to play books the right way on videos. That's his first assignment. So I'm excited for you guys to meet him. It's going to be awesome. And one of the things that we're thinking, just so you guys know kind of behind the scenes, is we're going to try recording like a video like this and then releasing smaller pieces over the month. So that way you guys can get more content more often. That's something that you guys have asked for is, hey, can you make it weekly? I ain't got time for that. So I can record something real long for you guys and we can break it up and we can release it over the month. We're going to aim for that. So it won't be live, it won't be interactive in this way, but I can probably come on and do some shorter live stuff in between. I don't know. We're changing up all kinds of things. It's going to be exciting. What's what say?
I see. This is great. There are comments coming through, but I'm not seeing them all in front
Oh,
of me.
I
So
see.
just one.
Pray without
It's all right.
ceasing. Very good.
Yeah.
Girls.
Yeah.
What was the part?
So it's Meemaw. Meemaw.
Meemaw.
No, the top one.
Oh, it says pray without ceasing.
Oh, great.
Somebody's like,
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
preach it.
acknowledge it, but I couldn't see it.
So I talked a lot tonight. Do you have anything to wrap up, to add?
I guess I have more of the simple points.
Yeah, no,
I
for
feel
sure.
like
Yeah.
when I think about my son on a daily basis, like that's what I pray for most, because I don't see him all the time and I can't control. I dampen my fear when I think what could happen to Clayton today,
Right.
and I go, nope, shut it down.
Right.
Yes.
Watch over Clayton.
Right.
Guide him,
Right.
keep him protected, and that shuts down fear like that,
Right.
and then I go on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
for sure.
So.
That's a great application.
Yeah. Because that's certainly an attack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And I recognize that. I go, oh no, and that's attack.
Right.
Clayton will be protected, and you just shut it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. All right then.
Yeah.
We love
All
you
right.
guys. We'll see you next month. We'll set a
Goodbye.
date. It'll probably be the end of February. And we'll see you then. All right. Bye.
Get engaged.